The man grabbed the feces from the ground and examined it closely. With a smirk, he smeared the feces all over his face and commanded everyone else to do the same. They all laid down on the ground and began to crawl forward, as if they were part of a hunt from 20,000 years ago. The target was a herd of yaks that was ahead of them. Suddenly, 3 ants crawled onto the man's hand, but he didn't even flinch and simply swallowed them, as if it was a normal thing. The chief gave the order and all the men charged at the yaks. The yaks were not to be outdone and charged back, with the starving humans on one side and the mad herd of cattle on the other. As the two sides got closer and closer, the opportunity finally presented itself and they threw their spears, forming a fence that blocked the yaks' path and caused them to lose their direction. Instinctively, the yaks turned around and rushed towards the edge of the cliff, and hundreds of them fell down. Suddenly, one of the yaks reacted and started to fight back. He charged straight towards Keda, the son of the tribe's leader. Koda's eyes were filled with fear as the fierce yak, lacking hunting experience, charged towards him, its horns ready to impale him. Desperate to save his son, the father threw his spear, but instead of stopping the angry yak, it ran faster and faster towards the edge of the cliff and tossed Keda over. In a last-ditch effort, the father yelled at Keda not to let go, but the rock he was holding suddenly snapped and he was falling fast. The father was filled with dread as he watched his son plummet towards the ground. He wanted to jump down and rescue him, despite the danger, but a member of the clan pulled him back, telling him that his son was dead and that he must take them home as the chief of the clan. The clan began to collect the prey, but the father kept calling to his son from the edge of the cliff until it was dark. It seemed that the boy was indeed dead. The next day, the father piled stones as a tombstone with grief-stricken eyes, turning away from the grave of his son, yet still needing to watch over his clan. Not long after the father left, a vulture on the hunt found him. Miraculously, Keda was not dead. Desperately, he called out to his father from the abyss below, his foot broken. The desire to live filled his brain and he tried to climb down, his fingers clenched on the tiny crack. Suddenly, his feet slipped and he lost his leverage. He could only rely on his hands to hold on to the wall for dear life, hanging halfway up the cliff. He was stuck, unable to go up and unable to come down. The sky suddenly opened up and a torrential downpour began. Koda's physical strength was pushed to its limits as he looked down into the unknown depths of the rain. There was still a chance of survival. Taking a deep breath, he leapt into the abyss. After an eternity, Keda emerged from the depths, miraculously alive. He stumbled to a nearby pool and drank some of the ancient, murky water. He then removed his shoes, revealing a swollen foot he had injured earlier. He found some stones and, with great pain, placed his foot in the middle and used all his strength to reset the bone. He then fashioned a makeshift brace for his foot and, with newfound determination, dragged his exhausted body to the top of the hill. When he arrived, he was met with a tombstone his father had left for him. Desperate and alone, Keda wondered how he would ever make it home without his father. Suddenly, a pack of wolves emerged from the shadows, and Keda was frozen in fear. The tree became Koda's only hope for survival. He scrambled up it just in time, but the wolves still managed to bite his foot. In pain, Keda pulled out his dagger and stabbed the gray wolf. The crisis was over, and the pack stayed under the tree until dawn, leaving only the wounded gray wolf behind. Keda fashioned a spear from his dagger, ready to finish off the gray wolf. However, when he heard the wolf's desperate plea for help, Koda's heart softened. He was a man who was afraid to even kill a wild boar, so how could he do it to a wounded gray wolf? Looking at the dying wolf, Keda decided to save it. The wolf was lying on the ground, barely alive. Keda was scared, but he mustered up the courage to approach it. He grabbed a rope and put it around the wolf's mouth, so it couldn't show its teeth. He then picked up the wolf and took it to the river to clean its wounds. He named the wolf Alpha. Suddenly, some hyenas appeared, and Keda quickly ran away with Alpha in his arms. He managed to escape to a nearby cave, where he finally got a good night's sleep. The next day, he picked some herbs and applied them to Alpha's injured foot. He had just taken a sip of water to recharge his energy when Alpha suddenly removed the rope from its mouth. Keda was terrified, but he slowly passed the water to the wary Alpha. Keda was paralyzed with fear, but he kept murmuring calming words. Miraculously, the Alpha seemed to understand him. Gradually, the Alpha's hostility towards Keda began to dissipate and he started drinking from the bowl of water. Keda then found some worms and used them to treat the Alpha's wounds. The wolf's behavior had drastically improved. The following day, Keda discovered a rabbit and determined to dispatch it for sustenance. When Keda returned to the cave, he was preparing to drill wood for the fire, but the alpha was getting increasingly excited. He attempted to take the rabbit's meat, so Keda retaliated by slapping him with the wood and biting off a piece of raw meat, asserting his dominance. It was clear that the alpha had endured a great deal of hardship. He lay on his back, not daring to move. That night, Keda lit the fire and savored a succulent roasted rabbit. The alpha watched him with drooling anticipation, and Keda threw him some bones, which he ate with great pleasure, seemingly forgetting that he was a wolf. Eventually, Keda and Alpha had both recovered from their injuries. Before he left, Keda said his farewells to Alpha, but the wolf was unwilling to let him go. No matter how hard Keda tried to shoo him away, Alpha refused to leave his side. Taking a wooden stick, Keda chased Alpha away, but the wolf simply took the stick in his mouth and followed him meekly. Thus, the two began their journey home, a man and a wolf, side by side. Hunting became much easier with Alpha around, and Keda was able to enjoy a delicious roast meat every night, strengthening their bond. As the campfire died out, Alpha would come closer to keep Keda warm with his body. In the morning, Alpha would lick him, but the smell was unbearable. Taking him to a nearby river, Keda and Alpha had a wonderful time playing in the water, with Alpha even catching a large fish. As the autumn and winter months passed, the bond between Keda and Alpha grew ever stronger. The entire wilderness was blanketed in snow, and as night fell, Keda was enjoying a meal when Alpha suddenly rose in a defensive stance. Not far away, a pack of wolves were watching them, but Alpha made a surprising move. The king of the wolves approached with a fierce spirit, causing Keda to freeze in fear. To Koda's surprise, Alpha walked towards the wolf king, signing to him to let Keda go, as they were friends. Keda didn't expect the wolf king to comply, but Alpha didn't leave. He seemed to be asking for Koda's opinion. Keda knew very well in his heart that Alpha didn't belong to him, although Alpha was very reluctant to leave. In the end, he chose to depart and Keda set out on his journey home alone without Alpha's company. Keda was filled with loneliness as he continued his journey towards home, perhaps it was fate. As he passed through a sheet of ice, Keda spotted Alpha not far away and ran towards it with excitement. Unbeknownst to him, danger was lurking and the ice suddenly shattered. He fell into the icy, biting water of the river and the powerful undercurrent swept him far away. Desperately searching for a way out, his life hanging in the balance, Keda was at a loss. That's when Alpha appeared, leaping up to try and break through the ice. Unfortunately, his weight was not enough. In the nick of time, Keda pulled out the dagger in his arms and with several blows, he finally managed to cut through the ice. Alpha rushed to bite his sleeve, allowing Keda to escape from the danger. The temperature was tens of degrees below zero and he was shivering from the cold. The Alpha kept licking his cheek, so Keda took off his clothes which were already frozen. He held the Alpha close to the fire to keep him warm, but he still had a bad cold. This time, the Alpha didn't leave, instead deciding to stick with him. The weather worsened with each passing moment and suddenly, a pack of hyenas appeared ahead. Alpha and Keda were running for their lives, the hyenas hot on their heels. In a desperate attempt to find safety, they darted into a nearby cave, unaware of the powerful creatures that lurked within. Alpha took a defensive stance, and a massive black panther slowly emerged from the shadows. Keda readied his bow and arrow, and with a single shot, the panther was slain. Alpha stood up, relieved to see Keda safe, but his body had reached its limit and he collapsed to the ground. This time, Keda saw him as one of his own and vowed to take him back to his tribe. After clearing away the snow, Keda found the stones the tribe had piled up, and the markings that meant he was not far from home. The blizzard was intensifying and Alpha was in dire need of medical attention. Alpha eventually collapsed, and Keda, knowing he could not abandon him, picked him up and continued on. Despite the treacherous conditions, Keda persevered and eventually made it back to his tribe with Alpha in tow. He finally laid eyes on the tribe, but Alpha's life and fate were unknown. With a weary body, he returned home, and even his father couldn't believe it. Keda pointed his finger in Alpha's direction and pleaded with his father to save Alpha, no matter what. When he awoke again, the first thing he did was search for Alpha. Alpha was still struggling for life with the witch's help, and then, to everyone's surprise, Alpha gave birth to a litter of wolf pups. It turns out that during the journey home, Alpha had been pregnant all along. The clan was moved to tears. Soon after Alpha recovered, the litter of wolf pups grew up and became part of the tribe. This story is a testament to the power of love and respect.